Welcome. You are now about to begin the Robotics Program, Succession Planning. This is going to be part one of the three-part program. And so think of succession planning as a form of insurance. It's one of those things that you don't think you're ever going to need until you really, really need it. Unlike insurance plans, which you may not ever use, Robotics Program succession planning you will eventually use. And that's the whole point. You have to have one in place when it's ready. The last thing you want to do is go and reach for a succession plan that really isn't there, and it just becomes sort of a backup of, some people would describe it as a replacement plan rather than a succession plan. So we're going to go through this, and first off, I'm going to start off with the objectives of the program. The first one is define succession planning for a robotics program. We're also going to go into why succession planning is necessary for the long-term success of your program. We're going to learn about who does the succession planning for your program. We're also going to talk about how to prepare for succession planning. And then probably one of the more important pieces of this program, learn the roles, responsibilities, and skill sets needed for succession planning. And so the last piece is going to be how to identify, develop, and transition candidates for succession planning. And so we're going to cover this in the three-part program, so hang in there. This is going to be the first part. And as we go through it, I'll begin to reveal what I think are necessary components of a succession plan and how to develop one. So the first piece is, what is it? It's a process for identifying, developing people with the potential to fill key positions in the program. And that's going to be the important piece, key positions. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be involved in your program at various points, but there's going to be certain people that are essential. And you want to make sure that there's always somebody there in that position. And so we're going to talk about how to do this. And the other thing to remember is this is not to be confused with replacement planning. Replacement planning is just focused narrowly on identifying specific backup candidates, and that's just a definition taken out of Wikipedia. But I'm going to tell you what it really is, and everybody has been in that situation, particularly surgeons. When you're in the operating room and someone says, well, our circulator is going to be gone on break, or they're it's a change of shifts, so we're getting a new person. And what happens is you get somebody who comes into that position, and you ask for a particular instrument, and all of a sudden the person looks up at you and says, I don't know, where's that? They don't know. That's a replacement. That's somebody who hasn't been developed and groomed for that position, and now all of a sudden they're getting thrown into a room, particularly say a robotics room, and they have to learn the new technology in a very short period of time, and there just isn't time for it. And certainly in the middle of a case, you don't want that to happen. Well, it's the same thing with a program. You develop people, you get them up and running in your program, and last thing you want is for all of a sudden one day someone to say, well, I'm retiring or I'm moving on, or I found another job, or I'm going to transfer somewhere else in the program, and now all of a sudden you're sitting there looking at it going, where are we going to find somebody, And this program is all about making sure you have that person. Because what you want to do is when that happens to be able to say, great, if you're leaving, then so-and-so is going to take your place. And that's really what we're trying to get you the point to. So my advice, and I have a series of tips throughout this presentation, and you'll see, first one is start early. Have a succession plan in place, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And it's really not as difficult as you might imagine, and it's pretty, once you've been through this program, I think you're going to have a pretty good understanding about how you can go about setting that up. But my advice is start early, get your program up and running, have everybody pretty much sign off on it, and so that if you have a problem, you have any hiccups along the way, you're ready to implement the plan. And the thing is it should be seamless. And so why do it? And I just gave you a hint. You want a seamless transition for a key position in the program. You don't want, it takes a little while to get these programs up and running. And so, do not get into a situation where you get something going in the first few months and then a key person leaves, and next thing you know, the program's set back. And you get enough of these setbacks, and what happens is people start to look at the program and go, well, what's the point of the program? We never really get anything going. Well, if you don't have a succession plan in place, that's part of the thing that causes the demise of a lot of programs. They think they want one, they get it up and running, and then all of a sudden they run into these problems along the way with key people leaving, and they don't have a succession plan in place, so they have no way of getting continuity in the program. The other thing is you have to think of this as, this is a potential spot where you can groom people. So it creates opportunities to assess promising candidates for promotion. And so you want to be that program where your C-suite and your medical staff leadership is looking at you and saying, hey, that's a great place to send somebody. We can develop people in that program. And so it's a great place to put somebody. And if you've got a candidate and somebody who wants to be ready to step in that position, that's great. You can groom them along the way. The other thing is prevent setbacks in the development of programs projects. That's different than the program, but it's related. And so a program can have a specific project, and typically have like a lead. Say you're working on reducing turnover time or something like that. And you have somebody in the operating room who's going to be your key person, that leader of that group who's going to be focused on that. And so all of a sudden that person leaves, and now you have a major setback in your program, and you got to start all over again. Like, where's the data? Did they record it anywhere? Did we have any analysis done on this yet? What was the plan? What were the process steps that we were implementing in this? All of a sudden, the whole program just falls apart because your key person of that program left, and you got to start it all over again. One, you got to go fill. You have to fill their position. And then the second piece is you got to get them up to speed on the new program, and you're going to hope, the new project, and you're going to hope that that person can catch up fast enough. The trouble is, they usually don't. They take a while. And during that time period when you have that downtime, it just stretches everything out. All of your plans, all the projects you're working on, all of a sudden get disrupted. And that can really, really hurt a program. So even projects that have hiccups along the way can create problems. But you get enough of them, what happens is your programs begin to suffer. So this really promotes long-term sustainability of the program. It keeps the program running during seamless transitions, and everybody, I think, begins to see it as a place that you really enjoy working. It also positions the program for flexibility to grow. So let's say you have one robot, and all of a sudden, in a really short period of time, you get a number of surgeons who come on staff, and they all want to do robotics. And you're looking at maybe, wow, we need 2, maybe 3 robots. And you're worried that, what's the program going to do? Where are we going to get the people to sort of help us with this? Maybe, before you just had a few people on your program and on your committee. Now you're looking at, you got to bring more people on. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, if you have the succession plan in place, there's some key people that have already been identified, and they've been groomed for those positions, so you can bring them on board really quickly and grow your program at the same time. And I think it also creates a team culture of support. Nothing like walking into a program where they have that seamless transition, because you get involved in a project and all of a sudden the lead is gone. Somebody else is going to step in and take over that person's role, and that's really important, because now the other members of the team start to feel like they don't have to worry about that happening because it's all covered with the succession plan. So that's a really important reason for why you want to maintain this. So who does it? Typically if you work in a hospital, if you think about succession planning and things like that, it's usually human resources that'll do that. And then particularly for the executive leadership, you'll see a talent management program where they're specifically grooming people for leadership positions. And so that's probably not going to happen in a robotics program. The reason is because you're more than likely going to have people who are not employees of the hospital in this program. And so you still have those as critical positions, and you're going to still need to be able to bring them in. And so the best thing to do is to just say our program is going to have a succession plan. And I think the team leadership should really be driving that process. It's up to the team, obviously, to fill those positions, but really it's the team leadership who's the ones who are going to lead it. So those are the people that I would say they're primarily the ones who are going to do it. I also think you need to use your medical staff, your administrative leadership to provide a consultant role. You may not know it, but there may be somebody else on medical staff that medical staff leadership would like to groom. And if there's a physician leadership piece, or there's a multi-specialty lead that they would like to have developed, that might be a good place to put them. Hey, let's start them out on the robotics program, get them up and running there. The other thing is administration may be also grooming people that you may not be aware of. And so you might want to talk to them, because they may be able to find people who they think would be really, really good candidates for you to groom and bring into your program. So just keep that in mind. You also have to know that are those two groups going to have the power to recommend candidates? I would strongly recommend that they should have some say in that process. And the real question is going to come down to, do they have the power to veto candidates? And if you're politically astute, you may have figured out that medical staff who makes a recommendation and does not want somebody in a particular role, and you go ahead and put them in that role, you're going to run into some roadblocks along the way. And the same thing for administrative leadership. And so you just have to be aware of that. It comes down to local politics and how you do it at your organization. But I would say get that settled up front. Will they or will they not have veto power within the program? You're more than likely going to find that in order to get a lot of things done, you may have to grant them veto power, or at least some sort of definitely some recommendation power. So think that over, but you have to decide that for your program. I think it's actually probably a good idea just because it keeps peace in the family, and you could probably use that among all the other things you have to accomplish with your program. So it's a good way to start. And then your team members, remember, they should be advisory roles. You don't want them necessarily to be voting on candidates, so to speak, but you definitely want them to have a say in the process. They may have worked with these candidates, some of them before, and when that's the situation, they may know something about how they work in groups and teams, and you may find that somebody works better than another person. So it's always good to get their input. And then HR and talent management, same thing, an advisory role. And sometimes you do have to go, I think, either to the administrative leadership or the human resource to learn about certain people. And I had a situation happen to me one time where I had a nurse who was somebody who I thought within our group was really somebody that I wanted to get put into more of a leadership role. And I brought it up with our chief nursing officer, and she just shook her head and said no. And I said, why not? And she said, because she's going through corrective action process for something else unrelated to our committee. She did a stellar job on our committee. The problem was that she was outside having some problems. And so that ended up being great advice. So we did not promote her internally and let the corrective action process follow through. She ultimately left the organization. And so that would have really crippled me if I had moved her up. And so we ended up finding somebody else to fill that role who did an outstanding job. So that to me was, sometimes you got to bring these people in. They're going to know things you may not know. We tend to sort of live in our own little bubbles sometimes, and sometimes it's good. Well, actually, all the time it's good to get out and see how other people are seeing these candidates, because they're going to play an important role in developing them too. So you're going to want their buy-in. So how to do it, and I've got this program. It's broken out into 3 sections. This is the first section, obviously, and what we're going to talk about in the next section, in session 2 or part 2, is where it fits within your robotics program model. So whether you realize it or not, every program has a model. That is, how does it working? What are the pieces of it? And I'm going to present a model to you, one that I've worked on over the last few years. I think it's a pretty good model. And I'm going to point out exactly where succession planning fits within that model. I don't think you have to necessarily buy into my model, but I do think that, one, you have to have a model for your program and understand what that model is. It really guides what happens within a program. And the other one is you should have some idea where succession planning fits within that model. And I think that's important. I'll touch on that in the next section. We're also going to talk about the 3 key elements of candidate selection. We're going to go into roles, responsibilities, and skill sets. So roles, not to be confused with job titles, although they can be exactly the same. But you can have a person, say a physician leader of the robotics program, or you can have a medical director of the robotics program. Functionally in a role, they're exactly the same, but they may not necessarily have a title. And there's a lot of different reasons why that may be, but just don't get the two confused. Remember, it's the role you want to focus on. Responsibilities, also not to be confused with job descriptions. People do things all the time that are not in their job descriptions, and you're going to find that on the robotics program. You may have to move people around in terms of what their responsibilities are, but they may not necessarily align with what their job descriptions are. And then skill sets, not to be confused with education and training. It's not that education and training is not a piece of the skill set. It's just that sometimes people bring things to the table that aren't necessarily related to any type of education and training, and it's purely experience that they're bringing to the table. And you have to understand that that's an important asset to have as part of your program. We're also going to talk about where to identify and recruit potential candidates, and then how to develop your candidates, and then last, how to transition from a candidate to a leader. That is, how to move them from somebody who you're grooming to somebody who you put into that leadership position, or as a member of your committee who has full roles, responsibilities, and skill sets that they bring as part of the assets of your committee. So we'll talk about the last 3. Actually, part of the 3 key elements will be in the 3rd section, and all 3 of the last 3 bullet points will be covered in the 3rd section as well. So here's another tip. This is what I would call probably the first step when you're talking about succession planning. Talk to the person who is leaving or going to be potentially leaving. And what I mean by that is talk to your members. Find out what they understand about their role. Find out what they understand about the responsibilities and the things that they bring to the table. You're going to be surprised. There are times that they're doing things that you're probably not even aware that they're doing. And you'll find this a lot, say, with administrative assistants and with data analysts. They just end up bringing a lot more to the table than is at first glance. And I'll go through, when we talk about that, I'll give you some examples of it. But just, it's always nice to talk to that person. And there's a few reasons why, other than just to find out what they perceive as their responsibilities or roles. But it gives you an inventory of things that you're going to be looking for a person in succession planning. The other is it gives you a chance to kind of vet sort of firsthand who they think would be a good person who could step in for them. And there you go, right there. You're already starting in your succession planning, because now you have people on your team working to go find people who are going to replace them if necessary. And you want to keep track of those names, and you want to keep track of them somewhere so that other leaders in the program are aware of it. And so with that, I'm going to leave my contact information and also my website. And so you can always contact me at terryloftusmd@gmail.com, or visit me at www.loftushealth.com. And when you go there, you can fill out a contact form. Just send me a question. I'll send a response back to you. So with that, I'm going to close out this session, and we're going to move on to part 2. So thank you very much, and have a great day.